Hello, everyone. Warmest welcome. Whilst we wait for people to be joining, it'll be great to know where you're dialing from. So if you can drop in the chat the location where you're based, that'd be amazing. We always love to see where people are dialing from. Just for context, and because we don't have elevator music today, I'm in New York, so rainy day. Well, we've been blessed for 2 weeks of amazing weather, and now this is changing. Awesome. We are seeing some people dialing from amazing places: San Francisco, Istanbul, Zagreb, Barcelona. This is awesome. We'll give London, Utah, amazing. We'll leave folks a few more seconds before we formally kick off. We're also seeing Mexico, Madrid. Well, pretty international audience. Boston, we love it. We have amazing customers in Boston. Global audience. We cannot be prouder. Cool. Well, without further delay, let's formally kick off. Hello and warmest welcome everyone to our webinar with Christian Barik. I cannot be more excited. Very short introduction on me, your host today. I'm Julio Martinez. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Abacum. And as you know, it's my absolute pleasure to have you, all of you, joining today from all these global cities. I'm particularly excited about this session and obviously share a stage with a friend and a key pillar of the finance and FP&A community, Christian Barik. And as you know, he needs no introduction, but still, I'll go ahead and share a little bit about his background. Christian is an FP&A expert with over a decade of leadership experience at multinational companies and fast-growing startups. Today, Christian directs the FP&A certificate program at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and shares his insights through his own training programs as the founder of FP&A Prep and on LinkedIn. He's a must follow. Over 30,000 finance professionals and business leaders subscribe to his weekly newsletter, FP&A Tuesday. And you can discover more about his work at fpaprep.com. Christian, it's amazing to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining.
It's a pleasure to be here again today, Julio.
We are very excited. Christian and I have been preparing this with the usual love of our craft, and we have amazing content for the audience today. As you know, our webinar will run for about 45 minutes, and we are here to deconstruct how to remove and minimize manual tasks in the FP&A workflows. And we will be exploring the conversation around 4 areas. First of all, we'll be tackling data cleaning, reducing the time and errors of manual transformation. Second, collaboration and stakeholder engagement, creating consistent, streamlined workflows with your business partners. Third, modeling and dimensional analysis, moving beyond spreadsheets for complex business models. And fourth and last, streamlined reporting, saving time and reducing errors in executive reporting. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into it with the data cleaning and integration challenges. And Christian, you and I spoke about this, right? Data cleaning is often mentioned as one of the most time-consuming tasks for FP&A teams. And I'm sure the audience will relate to this, downloading CSV files, copy-pasting them in different spreadsheets, moving that from Excel to Google Sheets, and cleaning data. There is a variety, but what we often hear, it adds up beyond 50% of some teams' time. So from your experience, given that this is at the gist of the manual nature of what some teams need to do, what makes this step so labor intensive? And how does it detract from an FP&A team's ability to focus on more strategic tasks?
Yeah, so I'd like to share a true story from when I worked at a company before, and when I joined the company to lead one of the FP&A teams, I was surprised, to say the least, about how they were dealing with data. So each month we had to look at the marketing funnel and connect it to purchases because we were partnering with the marketing team. And so we had to look at website visits, trials, and then purchases that result from those website visits and trials. And the way that the team was getting the data was they went to a visualization system that was connected to other systems. And then they downloaded the data from that visualization system because they didn't have access to the other systems. Finance didn't. And I was surprised about that because that's not how visualization tools are meant to be used, right? They are supposed to be an endpoint for people to review charts, not to download data. So we downloaded the data into Excel, and then we had to manually manipulate it because the way the data came out of that visualization tool was not very useful for analysis right away because it wasn't intended to be, right? But that was the only way for us to get to the data, because apparently there was some manipulation that the visualization system did that prevented us from going to the source. And in addition, we only later realized that the company didn't have a clear definition of what a website visit really is. And to make matters worse, they had two different ways to determine whether something is a unique website visit. Both were brought into this visualization tool, and we spent a long time figuring out which one to use, right? And as a result, we spent at least a week each month in putting together our management reporting deck. And that's time that we would have liked to use to do analysis, to look at variances between actuals and forecasts and budget, because that's where we can really add value, because there you can come up with concrete recommendations about moving the business forward. But because there was so much data cleaning we had to do, and getting the data was so cumbersome, we just didn't have a lot of time for that.
Christian, thank you for sharing the real life story. Nothing better than experiencing things for oneself, and I'm sure many people in the audience are really relating to this. And for what it's worth, one of our more popular integrations is to BI solutions. so still, I think we are still there in many ways. Let me follow up on a very interesting topic that we've discussed and that we get a lot of questions about, which is data availability. And hey, the context is many teams, of course, rely on spreadsheets to manage and clean data manually, right, as we described. And many FP&A teams spend many hours each month chasing accurate data and cleaning it before they can start the analysis, the forecasting, the planning, all the value-added tasks that you just described. Share with us, Christian, please, how can you address data availability issues in this context?
Yeah, of course, when I joined that company and I was in charge of the team, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, right? Because I was dealing with the challenge that I just described. And so there are two ways you can address issues like that and solve the data cleaning issues. You can approach it from a process point of view. That's one way. Or you can approach it from a tool point of view and look at getting better tools. Process-wise, what I would recommend is implement a data governance process. So when you see that there is something that doesn't look right with the data, maybe it's the wrong format, or the definition isn't 100% clear, or maybe you're not sure whether the data is really up to date or not, that's another issue that we often have with data, then you may be inclined to just find out, fix the data you have so you can complete your report, right? And sometimes you have to do that because there's time pressure, the report has to be done right away. But if you keep doing that, you're not really solving the underlying problem. Because ideally, you go to the source and you implement a process there that actually prevents these issues even from occurring. And so I recommend the GEARS process for data governance. So I'll put that in, I'll put what it stands for in the chat just to make it a bit easier for people to follow. And then I'll explain what the GEARS framework, how that works. So ideally, if you have an IT department, you work with an IT department on this, or if you have someone in the finance team who is responsible for systems and analytics, you work with them. And so how the GEARS process works is you start with governance, you write down the standards for data ownership, security, privacy, compliance. You may find that your company doesn't have that yet. That's not uncommon, especially for smaller, more early stage companies. And then it's about the execution. Execution means you write down how you implement and monitor those data policy processes. And what's important here, and that's why I like this framework, is there needs to be someone responsible for that. So there needs to be someone responsible who looks whether these data policies that you spend a lot of time writing down are actually being implemented. If you don't have anyone, or if you say, oh, everyone should be responsible, it's probably not going to happen. Then architecture means you want to have a repository, you want to have somewhere written down what each metric means, how it's defined, how it's being used. That should be your single source of truth. And again, someone, ideally one person, needs to be responsible for keeping that up to date. It doesn't work if everyone's responsible, because then people just don't do it. There are other urgent things that get prioritized. And then realization means that you don't document how metrics are actually being used, because what you want to avoid is that you spend a lot of time creating the metrics, making sure they're up to date, they're clean, and then no one uses them because maybe they don't know that those metrics even exist. So that's the realization part. And then lastly, the support means it's not a one and done, unfortunately. You can't just write the policy and then all your data issues will be gone forever. You need someone who does ongoing support and maintenance, and that includes training, right? It's super important that people are trained on where do the metrics come from and how are they being used. So that's the process part of it. But then you can also, and I highly recommend that everyone takes a look at that, use tools to make the entire process easier. Because ideally, you want one system of record, one single source of truth system that houses all the data points, all the metrics you need in FP&A, right? That you need to create your reporting, to do your analysis. And usually that means you have a database layer sitting on top of all of your other systems. And that's not a visualization system, right? A visualization system is not a database system, not one that actually helps you with reporting and planning, etc. So you want a tool that connects with your ERP, with your HR system, with your CRM system, and then brings everything together in a database and automatically structures the data to make it as useful for you as possible. So what that does is that you don't need to get a download from your ERP, maybe you have a different sales system, a different product system. You don't have to do that because it's all connected in the cloud, in the database. You have easy access to it, and even better, you can even connect your reports to it so that they refresh in the format you need them to be automatically.
Christian, this is so helpful. Thank you so much. And we truly love your frameworks. Folks out there, the GEARS framework, I loved it. Very useful, very actionable, very didactic. So thank you so much for sharing. Before we move to the next question, which is around collaboration and streaming workflows, please drop your questions in the chat. Don't let Christian leave today's call if you have questions. So make sure we make very good use of his time and his wisdom, so that we'll learn and make this session meaningful. This is why we're here. Following up question, the collaborative aspect of FP&A is critical, and of course we've debated and talked a lot about business partnering, XP&A, so there are a number of trends and buzzwords there. However, if we go at the root of it, the manual data sharing process can create a lot of friction, right? The very foundation. how do these traditional methods limit effective communication and alignment between FP&A and other departments?
Yeah, so I'll give an example of what the traditional method of data sharing looks like. And I'm sure that many of you here listening will probably recognize their own processes there. So let's say you're working on updating the forecast for this month. And you need to collect inputs from the marketing team on leads, from the sales team on what's in the pipeline, and from the product team on how new features you're launching would impact your revenue forecast. And you send each of them a spreadsheet that gives them, some actuals from the past to make it easier for them. And then you collect their forecast. They email the files back to you, and then you consolidate it all in Excel. Probably you have your Excel file set up to make it fairly easy to consolidate it, as long as, of course, they stick to the format you emailed them and they don't add new rows or, even worse, new columns, because then your consolidation would be a lot more difficult. And you consolidate it in Excel. So far, so good, right? You still have 2 days until the management reporting meeting where you have to present it. So you think you're good. But then the next day, in the morning, the sales team sends you another file apologizing that unfortunately they missed a big opportunity in the file they sent you a day earlier. So please use this latest file and definitely don't use the file that we sent you yesterday. You say, okay, fine. I have to update everything now because I already updated my presentation. I updated, I have to do the consolidation again. That's fine. I'll stay later that evening and I update it. Okay. Next day, right? You present the numbers. You have your slides up. You're sharing the forecast update. The several VPs are in the room. The VP of sales is there as well. And then the VP of sales asks, he actually asked his own team, we're sitting next to him. So what I'm seeing here on the slide, does that include our latest estimate with the new opportunities? And you answer yes, you have included the update from yesterday. But then a sales manager raises his hand and says, actually, we meant to send another update yesterday evening. Did you receive that? And you said, no, I didn't receive that. And then the sales manager responds, oh, maybe that means maybe they didn't send it to you because it was already reflected in the file they sent you earlier in the day, yesterday. I'm not sure. This is an example of losing version control, right? And this is unfortunately what can happen if you have followed these traditional methods of data sharing.
Thank you so much, Christian. And I definitely relate to that. And I've been in many meetings where all of a sudden you're looking at stalled data, and it is what it is. Then let's look at how we can incorporate some best practices to address these problems and actually drive more meaningful collaboration around the metrics that matter and that move the business. So let's talk about best practices and how you would recommend FP&A teams to build structured, collaborative workflows that allow for seamless stakeholder input and, tending to reduce dispersion in issues and minimizing this back and forth collaboration that we all do via Sheets, Slack, email, like different means.
Yeah, again, you can tackle this by changing your processes or doing both, changing your tools. So from a process perspective, I recommend don't use email or even instant messenger to share files. The problem with email is that you probably have, you get a lot of emails about many different topics. And so your inbox is probably, pretty, it takes you some time to go through each day. And even if you have a good system to do that, it can still be easy to miss something or you might be unsure, is this meant to be an update for this forecast or for the other forecast? Or, how likely is it that the people who send you this, like what is the probability associated with that? So let's say you get an email and then you realize it only in the evening. Maybe then you don't have time to go back to that person and talk to them and double check, hey, I saw you emailed me a new forecast estimate, but it looks like it's very low probability. Do you really want me to include that in the forecast? Super difficult if you do email. Some companies then say, well, then we use instant messenger. Maybe you use Slack or other tools to do that. But even that is not ideal, because when you get pinged, yes, you may see it right away when it comes to that. But if you get multiple pings, it may not be clear what's the most recent one. And it can also be that you're in a meeting, it takes you a long time to figure out what's going on, and then you get confused, which one is the latest one. So what I would recommend, if you don't have a planning tool, right, is to instead work with shared folders. I found that works much better. So you have a shared drive, and on the shared drive, you say, okay, this is my folder for the November forecast update. You ask people to put the file in there. And then you give them a deadline, and you say, on November 21st at 5 p.m., this is when this locks. I'm not going to even look at it beforehand, so feel free to make any changes you like beforehand. And then at 5 p.m., I will make this folder read-only. You can't put any additional files in there. And then I will review it, and we will use that for the management reporting update that's 2 days later. But of course, if something comes up at 6 p.m. or the next day, here's another folder for next month's forecast update. If it's after the deadline, we can't include it for this month, but feel free, to put your updates there. And if it's something big, we can speak to it in the meeting. We won't include it in the numbers in the consolidation, but we can bring it up in the meeting and speak to it, so we can talk about it. And what that does is it makes sure that you always know what the latest version is, because it will be the only version in that folder. And you protect your calendar, because you lock the folder at the deadline, and then if someone comes later, you put it in another deadline, in another folder. Now, if you use, that's one way of doing it. If you use a planning tool, then this can be even more seamless, because you don't have to deal with multiple folders. And many planning tools also allow comments. So that's kind of the best of both worlds, because in an email, it has all these issues I mentioned, but people can give a bit more context. In a planning tool, you have the ability to lock the version and say, okay, there's no further updating. It can automatically send a notification to the person who gave you the numbers. And you may also be able to get comments directly attached to that version. So okay, the probability is 60%, or, we're very sure about this. And the other thing that's cool about working with a fully built out planning tool is that you can easily switch back and forth between the versions. And even if you follow the folder structure that I laid out, that's difficult to do in Excel, because you would have to copy paste things again. You would have to update things, and things can break. But with a planning tool, I can easily say, let's take a look at how that compares to what you sent me, what you uploaded to the system a few days earlier, to see how much this big opportunity you just told me about actually impacts the bigger picture, right? That might be a question you're getting. And that's easy to do with a planning tool, and you don't risk breaking anything with copy paste, and you don't risk losing a lot of time just from going back and forth between versions.
Christian, thank you so much. Let me pick up a couple of notes from the audience that are relevant. And so we'll be squeezing in some questions and then leaving some others for the end. I think this one, more than a question, is a relevant comment from Jason, mentioning that he learned from his old CFO, good FP&A is good calendaring, so ensuring, and he's right. And I think you touched on that as well, Christian. Controlling the calendar, deadlines, setting clear expectations with leadership, staying in control of the process, to your point on focusing on the process, very meaningful. I like this question from Rakan. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this correctly. A while ago, I was wondering on workforce planning as part of the annual budgeting process. Most of my data came from the HIRS system. but it was unstructured and difficult to manipulate into the format that I needed for effective planning. What advice, and Christian, this is to you, what advice do you have for addressing this? How can I convince the HR team to improve the structure, the quality of the data, given that this is a two-way collaboration and critical point between HR and finance? That's a classic, and I'm sure you have a lot of insights. Yeah.
It's a great question, and this is a common issue because HR personnel data is different from financial data. Financial data you can get easily from an ERP system. It flows through if you have automated invoicing. It's no touch. You get it. Nobody had to go in and actually manipulate the data for you to know what the revenues and the expenses and the profits are. But people data is different because someone has to go in and make sure that it's maintained, it's being kept up to date. People come frequently, they leave the company, they move between different departments, which may impact your cost center reporting. And ideally, you also want data on the funnel. So if your company is hiring a lot, you ideally also want data on, okay, how far are they with finding someone to fill that open director of product position? Are they already interviewing candidates? Should I put in my forecast that we will fill this position next month, or is it not looking that great and we might have to wait another 4 months to fill this position? That's all important data, but it's all data that has to be manually added and that HR has to keep up to date. So what I would recommend is not to try to do it yourself. Right? Because if you start taking over some of these data maintenance tasks from HR, it will be very difficult to bring it back there, and it's just something on your plate. At the same time, I would argue that HR and recruiting, they're closest to the data because they're real time know about every personnel move, so they should be responsible to maintain it. But what you can do is you can try to make it as easy as possible for them. So see if you can, see if they need any data access that they don't have about maybe data that you see, or if you have a planning tool, maybe their life would be a lot easier if they can input the data directly into that planning tool rather than into their maybe clunky HR system. Or even better, if you have an integration with the HR system, but then you'd still have to make sure that it's getting updated and being kept up to date. So, it's making sure the process is clear, making sure they don't have any questions, because often I've also found that delays in data input like that happens because people aren't 100% sure really what you need and when you need it and in which format you need it. So that's how I would approach that.
Thank you so much, Christian. Please, folks out there, don't be shy. Continue dropping your questions. I see some others coming in. We'll leave some of them for later during the Q&A session that we'll do towards the end when we have the opportunity to have enriched the conversation with some more other questions. Hey, let's move on to the third topic we are tackling today, right? Data cleaning, collaborative workflows, structured, and now how can we enhance our planning capabilities with dimensional analysis? A lot of manual work on the planning side, forecasting, budgeting, scenarios. We know how cumbersome it can become. Very targeted questions from the CEO, from the board. Like we all relate with that pain. Like you need to deliver a very fast turnaround. Stakes are high, and this is where you need to shine. And then you feel the best you can do is to save us as a new version and try to remodel everything, and then yet another version that So we know what it means, and obviously on the other side, we also know that spreadsheets are extremely flexible. And hey, I'm that nerd, and I used to model without touching the mouse. So I truly love that flexibility and that agility. However, at some point in your journey, as the company grows, spreadsheets can also be limiting for teams that need to plan across multiple dimensions, be it by product, by region, by customer segment, or other complex variables, department, you name it. So Christian, from your perspective, how can multidimensional planning improve decision making, how relevant it is, and let's then afterwards explore how we make it easier.
Yeah, so let me first explain what multidimensional planning is. So let's say your company sells 3 products across 4 regions. So you want to understand the profitability of each product in each of the regions. That means you need to create 12 different, call them shadow P&L, right? It's called a shadow P&L because it's not the actual P&L you have in your ERP system. That would be for the entire company, but you want to know how each of your product performs by region. Now, those are dimension. Product is a dimension, region is a dimension. You may then also want to know by product, by region, what are the top 3 customers? It's another dimension. And while that's technically doable in Excel, because like you said, Excel is so flexible, it can become close to impossible to manage if you have many dimensions, because then instead of just 12 shadow P&Ls, maybe you would want to see 36. And then also, of course, if you have multiple versions when it comes to planning. Because when it comes to planning, what's super important is that it's a collaborative process. So it's not just finance doing the planning. You want to get inputs from the different departments. And ideally, you want them to be able to see how their inputs, if you have a head of sales for South America for one of your products, they want to be able to see that in the system, how it rolls up. And you in finance, you also want to be able to see, okay, if I'm changing that, how does that impact just this one region and then maybe the globe as well? Or maybe you want to look at the Americas. So you want to slice and dice the data, look at different dimensions. And that's super, super difficult with Excel to do, to an extent that, I heard that teams say that when they only have Excel, they're not even bothering doing this. But what multidimensional modeling can do is that it can show that you can, whether a specific product might be underperforming in a given market. And if you have many products, that means maybe you want to discontinue that product in that market. But you only see that if you have that multidimensional analysis capability. Or you need to allocate capital and you want to do that accurately because you want to make sure that the leader in each of those regions has the right amount of capital allocated. Or you want to hold people accountable better. And the way you can hold people accountable is by reporting on their specific slice of the business. So difficult to do with Excel, but like I mentioned before, there are planning tools that do this very well, that have unlimited number of dimensions you can use. And you can then also set this up as a self-service reporting where you can, where you have a dashboard, you send a dashboard to your VP, to your CFO, to your CEO, and they can then select the dimensions they're interested in without having to go to Excel. Because I'm sure, many of you will agree that sending a complicated Excel spreadsheet to your senior executives isn't always the best use of their time, right? Because they would have to spend a long time figuring out how the Excel spreadsheet works. They don't want to break anything. So if you have the ability to just send them a dashboard on a browser where you can easily select those dimensions, that's I think a better choice.
Christian, thank you so much. And this underpins one of our favorite topics, and you and I have spoken a lot about this, driving performance, driving accountability, and having the FP&A function and the finance functions emerging in the corporate, in the company as a key driver, a key agent of performance. And yeah, multidimensionality, I find it's key to then understand unit economics by product, by market, by region, as you said. So very powerful concept that we sometimes overlook. Let me switch on. I'm piling up questions, so I think we're going to have an exciting conversation later on. But hey, this question is very hot, and obviously you're an expert on it, and it's top of mind, I think, for everyone on Earth these days. How can FP&A use machine learning and Gen AI to become more efficient today, more targeted at removing these manual tasks and becoming more efficient, more impactful?
Yeah, generative AI like ChatGPT is top of mind for everyone these days. But I actually want to start by talking about machine learning because it's been around much longer. It's been around for decades. I implemented machine learning at Unilever when I worked there. I don't know, it was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And machine learning is mature, right? It's refined. It's been around for a long time. And what it is, it's algorithms looking at your historical data for sales, for expenses, for cash flow. And then it's very good at identifying patterns and trends. And then it can help you, or it actually does create for you a forecast, a projection. And what's great about machine learning is that unlike traditional models, they can handle a large number of input variables in parallel. So, and what's nice about this is you can experiment. You can experiment with putting in, maybe some leading indicators like your leads as part of the machine learning model, or even, when I was using machine learning during the pandemic, we realized that feeding the model that we wanted to use to forecast revenue with unemployment data had a huge impact on the forecast accuracy. We were actually surprised how much that impacted the machine learning model, but that would have been basically impossible to do with traditional forecasting in Excel because it's just so much data. And the other thing that's nice about machine learning is you can do what's called backtesting. So you can say, hey, machine learning model, forecast last quarter for me. Of course, you already know what the numbers were for last quarter, so you can compare how effective this machine learning model would have been in forecasting that. And then how data scientists use that is they create what's called an ensemble model, where they have 10 different algorithms, completely different algorithms, compete against each other every month. And it automatically chooses the one that had the best forecast accuracy in the last month, hypothetically, to forecast the next month. So that's really cool. But what's critical with machine learning is that it requires a bit of a mindset shift. So when I implemented machine learning at Unilever, we had a forecast variance, I think it was roughly 10%. And then leaders wanted to know, so what's driving the variance, right? Why do you have a variance? Where was the model off? And in traditional forecasting, you could look at your assumptions and you could look at how you built the model and answer that way. But with machine learning, it's a black box, right? Sometimes not even a data scientist can explain how the model actually worked and why it may have created a variance. And so the mindset shift is that with machine learning, it's all about the inputs. So you can say, well, maybe we had a 15% variance, so next time we will try different inputs and see if the variance improves. That requires a mindset shift for the leaders because they're getting different explanations for variances. But what I found is that my recommendation is to combine machine learning forecasting with other techniques. So when at another company I worked at, we tried just using machine learning to do the forecast, and the forecast accuracy was actually lower than doing machine learning, then have an expert make adjustments to it. Because the thing is that, yes, machine learning machines are great. They have no biases that humans have, but they also don't take context and nuances into account, right? And they're very sensitive to changes to data. And also your data quality has to be super high to use machine learning well. And so what we ended up doing is having a subject matter expert also in the mix, and that ended up improving the forecast accuracy a lot. So that's machine learning. You don't actually even need a data science team to do that these days. There are software tools that have that built in, where you don't need to be a data scientist or have a data scientist on staff to use that. And then generative AI. I mean, look, I think it's at the very beginning. Tools like ChatGPT and Gemini at the very beginning of the journey. And the tricky part for using it in finance is that they can hallucinate, right? And they're very convincing at pretending like they know the answer, but it may be completely made up. And so planning tools, software vendors actually currently racing to make these tools truly useful for financial analysis and forecasting. And I'm really excited about that because that can make a big difference. And this space is moving very quickly. So I recommend if you're, evaluating different tools for planning, ask them about it when you have a demo. Ask them about, hey, how are you using AI, and how are you dealing with the issue of hallucinations? Where free tools like ChatGPT are incredibly useful today are for helping you with commonly used software like Excel or your ERP system. If you use QuickBooks or Xero or NetSuite, you can just go to ChatGPT and say, how do I do this in Excel? Or I'm currently dealing with this and this challenge in Excel. Can you give me instructions? And then it gives you step-by-step instructions on how to do things, which I find fantastic. And there's a much lower risk there. Of course, you need to make sure you don't paste any company data into those free tools, but there you follow the instructions and you see if it's wrong. Like there's very low risk in dealing with hallucinations and such. So yeah, that's my approach to machine learning and AI right now.
Christian, thank you so much. This is very insightful and obviously a very useful and relevant topic. And I'm seeing some questions from the audience. So let me cover a couple of those. And look, the last one, Alex is asking, Christian, can you expand on what machine learning programs, tools you've used in the past? I think Victoria is asking something along those lines. What are the ML tools you recommend for forecasting? And maybe if you can wrap it up with Laura's question, what considerations should be taken into account when implementing AI, ML, if you want as well, driven tools in financial planning? I think it's the same bucket.
Yeah, thank you. So to answer Alex's question, when I implemented machine learning at Unilever, we actually worked with a third-party data science team based out of India. And but what's important to know there is that, of course, the data scientists you work with, they don't understand your business. We didn't understand machine learning. So there was some bridging going on and, some making sure that we can actually talk to each other and understand what we're talking about. But that ended up working out fine. I don't know any specific tools. One important thing to know if you're looking at tools is some of them come with econometric data. Some of those tools, they have access to publicly available data, inflation data, other econometric data, and that can be useful because, like I said, what's cool about machine learning is that you can experiment with adding additional data sources to your model to see if it improves your accuracy. And that's something to consider there when you're looking at those tools. And then the question that Laura had, so an important consideration is, and I mentioned this briefly, but it's important to highlight, is that machine learning for forecasting only works if you have good historical data, meaning the data quality is high, it's reliable, and you have a good amount of it. So if you're a brand new company, you're a startup, or maybe you only have 1 or 2 years of historical data, machine learning is probably not going to be very useful for you. Same if you have, messy data where you're just starting to track certain things and you haven't really figured out how to do data governance and all that. Machine learning also may not be great for you. But in a situation where you do have large amounts of reliable data, it can be super useful.
Christian, thank you so much. And let me add a quick comment on the amount of data that you need. So for ML, it varies, but specifically with AI, at least today, typically you're going to be needing 48 data points for it to increase how meaningful it is, right? So at least 48 months of historical data. This is changing fast. So our anticipation, and we're talking with people building those algorithms, probably in Q1, that's going to be as short as potentially 30, 24 months of historical data. As of today, the reality is that cutting edge technology requires for AI-driven forecasting and time series, 48 months or data points. So this is for context as to how much for the outcome to be meaningful, right? Which is obviously what you want.
Yeah, and just to add to Jason's point here, Jason said in the chat that he's worried about, when you show the output of the board of director, you can't just say, oh, well, it was made by AI. That's true. And that's why I highly recommend that you always combine a machine learning approach, an AI-based approach with something like a driver-based forecast, or a time series analysis, or a forecast based on expert judgment. So what someone who works in sales can tell you about the opportunities in the market, because then you can triangulate the two. And when you present it to the board, you can share the reasons from the traditional approaches that you've been using before, but you can say that you used AI and machine learning to ramp up your accuracy because you triangulated them. And then, you do both. You can do the justification, you can see the accuracy, and then maybe over time, the board of directors will develop trust in the machine learning solution because you can report on how much it helped you. And then over time, they may be more open to accepting it and accepting the way you're managing that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, thank you, Christian, and thank you, Jason, for the question there. It's a great provocation. At the end of the day, we are accountable for what we report. So, no excuses, right? So, triangulation, as you said, seems to be the way to go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let me put forward one of our last questions, but basically the topic of reporting to executives. Right? We all report potentially every week, definitely every month, definitely every quarter. So reporting, critical workflow for FP&A. And hey, a common problem that we know well is that creating that management reporting slide deck each month, in and out, quarter as well, takes too long. This is time we spend in slides, PowerPoint, and takes this time away from better analysis and business partnering. So, Christian, I would love to learn how you become more efficient with creating those, freaking slides every month.
Yeah. So when it comes to the slide deck, I recommend that you have two different parts of it. You have parts that are standard reports that don't change, that just get refreshed. And then you have a part of it, I call it the story slides, where you have different metrics every time. You talk about what's most relevant for executives to know about the last month or the last period, the last quarter, and where you need decisions on. So that those will be your story slides. They will be different every time. They take time to complete. It takes a significant amount of analysis to complete. You will create them manually. And then you have the standard reports, which ideally, which cover your entire business, everything that people would want to know, different slices of the company, different dimensions. They should be automated as much as possible. Now, if you don't have that automated yet, a few things that can help is build your PowerPoint first without even worrying about formatting at all. And then at the very last step, when everything is done and looks fine, you do the formatting. That can save you some time. Creating tables in Excel can save you some time rather than in PowerPoint because it's easier. And trying to keep the slides as simple as possible and focusing on clear messaging rather than bells and whistles, and putting as much as possible on the slide so you can show everyone at everything you looked at. That's not helping you. It's going to take you more time, and it's also not going to be helping leaders make decisions quicker because they already have a lot of metrics that they see every day. So you need to be choiceful about that. And often also the reason that people spend more time in PowerPoint is that they get last minute change requests, right? You have the deck ready, and then the next day your manager tells you, the CFO wants to see this and this scenario. Can you please create those slides? Can you please add those slides? How you can do, but I have a little trick how you can reduce those last minute requests. Create a shell before you finish the slides. That means have the slides, but don't really build out all the visualizations and even all the comments yet. Just put a box with the headline and what the key message will be for each slide and what you're going to show, without putting it yet. and then share that shell with your boss, with your CFO, and ask them for feedback and ask them, hey, I'm planning to make these slides this way. Is this what you would like to see? Or are there any other views you'd like to see? And then it's much more likely that you get those inputs before you actually put the slides together, because then your boss, your CFO can respond to something, and they don't wait until the last minute with telling you these things. That's from a process point of view. But again, planning tools are just fantastic at creating these standard reports and even helping with the story slides, because they connect with your ERP system, with your other systems. You set up your reports the way you want them once, and then so many of them even integrate with PowerPoint, where they automatically, update all the visualizations, all of the charts in your PowerPoint. And you essentially just press a refresh button, make some last final tweaks, and that can save a lot of time.
Well, thank you, Christian. Sergio's mentioning something I found interesting. In consulting, we call it the ghost deck.
Oh, yeah, I haven't heard that before.
Okay, yeah. So thank you for the contribution there. So let's just start recapping. I still have some questions from the audience, but maybe those are also related to these last questions about how can planning tools then help speed up FP&A processes. You've been discussing, how you can impact the process, how you can improve your technology for have impact multiplication. So how do you think of that, Christian?
Yeah, so I already explained how planning tools can help with data cleaning by integrating all the systems, and then you can decide how the data should be maintained in the database in the cloud. You decide that once, and then it stays that way, and there's no errors, or you can fix the errors at the source. Planning tools can make input sharing, collaboration workflows easy, because you don't have to send emails around anymore. You don't have to use Excel files where you don't know, okay, is it the latest one? Are you getting others? And instead, the people who give you inputs enter their inputs directly into the solution in the cloud. You still have full control whether you include it in the forecast or not. You can do that at the press of a button, and then all these consolidation issues and version controls issues go away, because many of these tools also have an audit trail where you can see where who changed what and when. They're great. They help with planning, because you can do multidimensional planning very easily, where you look at product, geography, customer dimensions, give people the ability to change things the way they want on the fly without you actually having to do it in Excel. And for reporting, they're fantastic, because you create your standard reports once, and then they can integrate with PowerPoint and just update your charts and your visualizations there at the push of a button. So I'm at a point where I used to work at a company that didn't have any of these tools, and I know the manual process, and I actually didn't even know that these tools could do all these things. But now, having worked at companies that have some of these modern planning tools, I'm currently full-time teaching and doing corporate training and teaching my courses. But if I ever go back, to do a director or VP of finance role, I will say during the interviewing process that I will only take the job if I can bring a modern planning tool on board, because I just know how big of a difference it makes.
Christian, thank you so much. This is very insightful, and it connects very well with one of the questions that I saw here from Claudia. Claudia Rivero is asking, what FP&A tools or software do you recommend? But also, very importantly, how would you go about post-interview process, right? So in your hypothetical situation, about convincing senior management to invest in these solutions?
Yeah, but that's the first issue, right? I don't actually. So let me talk about that first. You have to find out really if you're concerned that there might not be budget for this, right? You have to find out what your senior leaders care the most about. So I implemented a planning tool at another company, and at first, the CFO said no. And he said no, because the way I pitched it is, I said, we could save all this time. We have all this extra time to do higher value tasks, but somehow he didn't see it. But then I find out by talking to other executives that actually what he really cared about was financial controls and was making sure that we don't have any version control issues, that when he presents a forecast to the board, he can know that these are the latest numbers. It was vetted, we had time we reviewed it, and it's actually the numbers that the other heads of departments see as well. And when we show them that with a planning tool, this is basically guaranteed. Like there's no issues you can have with formula issues in Excel and version control issues. You have a perfect audit trail. That's what convinced him, to give us the budget to do it. So you need to find out in terms of which tool. There are many tools out there. I'm independent. I'm neutral. I don't give any concrete recommendations. I would recommend that you do multiple demos and really ask during the demo about, what's the support model. How long does it take to implement, and make sure you understand it? And there are many choices out there for these tools these days, which is another reason why I'm so in favor of implementing one, because there are great tools out there. And of course, Abacom, the sponsor of this webinar, is one of those tools. So definitely take a look at that.
100%. There is no perfect solution for everyone, right? So what really matters is that you understand well what you're trying to solve for, that you come up with the business value that you want to create. And it's not only time savings, but also those better decisions, that confidence in your forecast. There is a number of vectors where you need to be understanding what business value you want to create, because ultimately you want to make a decision based on ROI. And then you need to establish very clear decision criteria, right? What do I care about? Hey, you don't need to get lost in 30 super small, but maybe it is the case, right? But in general, like, have a clear understanding what's your decision criteria. And then based on that, you will be better positioned to find a solution that truly fits you, of course. So that is the way, actually, I would recommend everyone go about it. Good. Well, we have 2 minutes left. So, and we have a number of questions that unfortunately we didn't answer, but let's go with the last one that just came in. Apologies for the rest where we couldn't find the time, but we are here in case anybody has any follow-up question. And thank you so much for the engagement. Sergio's asking, when implementing a planning tool, how do you streamline the implementation phase so it's cheap and short? And do you recommend to start with one specific use case in FP&A and then extend the solution to other use cases?
So about the implementation, the first thing you need to figure out, and ideally already in the buying process, is will the software vendor help you in the onboarding process, or are they just doing the bare minimum and you have to get an outside vendor to help you with the setup process? There are differences there. That's number one. And then to make sure you have the support you need, right? And then the other one is you need to make sure it's one of your priorities. You do it at a time where you have the time to actually make sure you learn the software, because you don't want to implement a tool and then realize that you're not making use of all the features because you don't understand them. The good thing is that modern FP&A tools are easy to use. They're much more user friendly than 10 years ago. You don't need an IT team to onboard many of those, but you need to prioritize it and make sure that you put in the time needed. But that's also something you need to ask during the demo, because there are big differences in how long it takes to implement the different tools. And then you recommend to start with one specific use case and then extend to other solutions. That depends about your pain, right? It depends on how much you want the tool to do right away. It can be helpful to start with your one use case, because then also you can show the other departments how useful it is for them to use the tool, because most of them, it's not just finance who uses it, it's also the other departments. And then that can get quick buy-in, and then they will be more open, to rolling out the tool more broadly.
Christian, thank you so much. That was very insightful. And now we are right on time. So I truly appreciate everyone for joining the webinar. Christian, thank you so much for your insights. As always, a lot of wisdom. I have a lot of takeaways, and I truly appreciate everybody for making the time to join us today. Christian, looking
Thank you,
forward to the next
everyone. Thanks for having me, Julio. Great discussion as always. And thanks for all the good questions.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for the engagement. Looking forward to the next one. Speak soon.
Speak soon.
Bye.